Hello, my name is Nathan Taylor, otherwise known as Sockmatician, and this is a video tutorial to accompany the Sockmatician's Double Knitted Brioche ebook. This particular video shows it how to work Honeycomb Double Knitted Brioche worked flat. So Honeycomb Double Knitted Brioche, what on earth is that? Well, here it is. I've got some on my needles. You can see I've started this swatch as an ordinary DK brioche rib, and then at this point I've transitioned into Honeycomb Double Knitted Brioche. It's an absolutely beautiful and fascinating technique. The structure is gorgeous, the texture is beautiful, and I'm a really big fan of it. It looks like there's a sort of a fish scale or chainmail covering over the top of these brown knit stitches which are nestling in between the gaps there. What you might be surprised to learn is I haven't switched the colours over here. I'm not working in inverted mode here. I'm just carrying on with my knit stitches being created with the brown yarn and my purl stitches being created with the blue, but it switches the dominance of the colour as you transition from one into the other. Having a look on the other side, you can see it's 100% reversible, as is everything in double knitted brioche, and this side you've got the brown yarn making the fish scales or the chainmail, whichever way you want to look at it. It's absolutely beautiful. It's it lies very flat and has lots and lots of squish to it, which makes it really rather desirable. So how is it done? You'll be glad to know it's very similar to everything you've already learnt so far in learning how to work the rib. It's just a 2-row repeat. The first row of each repeat is simply working standard knit purl pairs of ordinary double knitted brioche, and this is how I'm going to do it. So at the beginning of the row I've got a slip stitch edge pair here, and that is how I'm going to start. So I knit the first stitch of the pair with my knit coloured yarn, bring that yarn to the front, and then I purl the second stitch with my purl coloured yarn, and that's the point where I take both yarns to the back between the 2 needles and set up in my hands ready for working. At this point you bring the purl coloured yarn to the front, coming between the 2 needles, and look what's happening here. There's one thing that is slightly different. When you're working in Honeycomb Double Knitted Brioche, I'm working into a purl coloured stitch with my knit coloured yarn. Now that's unusual. Usually you're always working into the same coloured stitch with the same coloured yarn, but here it's almost like a kind of moss stitch effect. So I'm going to be working into it. I'm doing exactly the same thing, but I'm working into a stitch of the opposite colour, so don't be put off by that. So I knit, I work my yarn over manoeuvres, and I purl with the purl coloured yarn, obviously into a knit coloured stitch. I take my knit coloured yarn to the back of the work. There's nothing different about that apart from the colour of the stitch that you are working into. So I'm going to carry on to the end of the row, and I'll join you when I'm done. Here I am then with 2 more pairs of stitches yet to work. One is the last pair of the double knitted brioche stitches, and the last one is the slip stitch edge pair. So let's dispense with those. Knit with the knit coloured yarn, yarn over manoeuvres, purl with the purl coloured yarn, and then as always when we're finishing a section of double knitted brioche, take the purl coloured yarn to the back of the work going between the 2 needles, and then work the slip stitch edge manoeuvre, which means slipping the first stitch, bringing the knit coloured yarn to the front, the purl coloured yarn to the front, taking the knit coloured yarn to the back, and slipping the purl coloured stitch there. I'm doing those little wraps, and I can turn the work over. And obviously on the other side my colours are going to switch around. That's normal with working double knitted brioche. I'm still going to work the first pair as a pair of slip stitch edge stitches, which means knitting with my knit coloured yarn, which is now blue because I've turned the work over, bringing it to the front and purling with my purl coloured yarn, my new purl coloured yarn. Then I take both yarns to the back and set up ready to start working again. So with the second row of the repeat, as I say, this first pair of stitches always worked according to the slip stitch edge instructions. But then in order to get going, I'm going to bring both yarns to the front of the work between the two needles. The reason for that is because I'm going to be starting with a purl stitch. Usually in double knitted brioche I'm working knit purl pairs. This time I'm going to be working purl knit pairs. I'm still going to work my purl stitch with my purl coloured yarn, my knit stitch with my knit coloured yarn, and as before in the previous row I'm going to be working into stitches of the opposite colour, but that doesn't affect what I'm actually going to be doing. The first stage after you have worked the first pair is to bring both yarns to the front of the work, and then using my purl coloured yarn, purl the next stitch with its yarn over. Then I take my knit coloured yarn to the back of the work, going over the top of the right needle. Now I can, using my knit coloured yarn, I can knit the next stitch with its yarn over. And then I take my purl coloured yarn to the back of the work, going over the top of the right needle, and return to the front of the work, coming between the two needles. Then I bring my knit coloured yarn to the front of the work, also coming between the two. That's a standard, ordinary yarn over manoeuvre. And as you can see, I'm now working ordinary pairs of double knitted brioche stitches. I'm just doing it offset. So I'm starting with a purl and working a knit, but I'm doing exactly the same things. So let me get back to the point where I would start that whole process, and I'll show you that again. So I've got both yarns at the front of the work at the beginning of the pair, because I've just brought them to the front. Now I'm going to purl the first stitch of the pair with my purl coloured yarn, take my knit coloured yarn to the back of the work over the top of the right needle, and knit the next stitch using my knit coloured yarn. Then I work the yarn over manoeuvres, and then I'm back ready to go again. There really is no difference at all between what I'm doing. It's exactly the same as we're used to. It's just that I've started the sequence halfway through. I'm going to continue doing that. Once you're started, once you're away from that first pair, it feels exactly like working ordinary pairs of double knitted brioche stitches. You're just doing it in an offset position. I'm going to get to the end of this row, and I'll show you how to finish off. So here I am then at the final pair. I've just worked my yarn over manoeuvres to finish the set there, and this time for the last pair, exactly the same as before. Purl with my purl coloured yarn, take the knit coloured yarn to the back of the work over the top of the right needle, knit the next stitch with its yarn over with that knit coloured yarn, and then I'm just going to take my purl coloured yarn to the back of the work, going over the top of the right needle. That's all you need to do to get back into the right position for working the slip stitch edge. And the slip stitch edge is done in the manner that you already know. And that really is all there is to it. That's honeycomb double knitted brioche. It's exactly the same as the steps you already know. It's just offsetting the pairs. The only thing you really need to know is at the beginning of the row, once you've worked that first pair, you just start everything off by bringing both yarns to the front, and at the end you take both yarns to the back over the top of the right needle if they're not already there, ready for working the final pair as a slip stitch edge. And that is working honeycomb double knitted brioche.
Zip!